Buying the wrong type of property in Calgary could cost you tens of thousands of dollars, or worse, leave you with a property that nobody wants. I've seen buyers regret their decision based on not knowing what the flood zones, the location, the nightmare of resale, or some of the hidden costs that only pop up once you move into the property. In this video, I'll let you know my thoughts on the properties that you should never buy so that you don't make the same costly mistakes. Let's get into it. All right, and to start off with, I just have a few location challenges, and the first point being is I would never buy on a busy road, whether that's like McLeod Trail or like the collector roads in the suburbs. I wouldn't do it because they are busy, obviously, and you've got issues with families thinking their kids are going to get run over, so there are resale issues, and it can be louder, and it just can be a bit annoying living on a collector road. So living on a busy road is not for me. And there are some homes that are like backing onto like Anderson or McLeod, these busier highways. And just the traffic noise would annoy me. And so it does affect your resale value. The second point, I wouldn't live right next to like a C-train stop or train tracks. The trains are super loud. They come at odd hours. I once lived on in a condo on 7th Avenue in the western part of the Beltline, and whenever the C-train came by, which is often, you could hear the bells ringing. Even though I was on the 7th floor, it gets super loud. They come at odd hours all the time, so very annoying. And if you live very close to a C-train stop, you will get vagrants as well. And occasionally I'll show properties that are in front of bus stops, and I wouldn't do that. You got people waiting outside your home, extra cars parked out there, the buses are kind of loud. So that would be kind of annoying. I wouldn't do that. And the same idea with schools. You know, some people will love living next to a school, but most people won't like it. It'll be busier, you've got fights sometimes, you've got extra cars parked in your area. So same kind of idea as a bus stop. It would just be louder and you've got more traffic. Again, some will love it, but most people would probably dislike living right next to a school. And I probably wouldn't live in the deep northeast that's close to the airport, especially like on a runway path. It can be super loud. I've golfed near the airport, and like every 3 minutes there's a massive plane landing, and they are quite loud. And in some parts of the northeast you can actually hear this, and it's constant. It's 24 hours a day, like every 3 minutes there's a plane landing. Calgary Airport is super busy, and depending on where you are in the northeast, you can hear some of the airplane noise. And the last point here on location issues, I wouldn't buy, like, if you can see the power lines or any kind of cell towers. I once had a listing in North Glenmore Park, a very nice neighborhood, and we couldn't give this property away because out the back door you could see like the power lines running kind of parallel to the property line. And so every comment was, we love the home, but we just don't like being so close to the power lines, and that would affect your resale value if you bought a property like that. Oh, and before I forget, if you are watching this and you are thinking about making a move, if you go to the pinned comment, I have a buyer's guide, seller's guide, relocation guide, and all my contact info. I would love to be a resource and help you out. All right, let's get back into it. And the next point, I wouldn't live in a designated flood zone. Now, you think it would be common sense, but it's easier said than done, as most cities are built along rivers. So in Calgary, we've got Nose Creek, we've got Bow River, the Elbow River, and the Glenmore Reservoir, and large parts of the city are actually in flood zones. Most of the downtown is actually in a flood zone as well. So easier said than done, but you have to exercise common sense. And if it doesn't pass your eye test, then I probably wouldn't live there. And there are certain areas where the river bends a lot, where it's more prone to flooding than the straight stretches of the river. But there's a flood map available online, and you can check that out. But I probably wouldn't live in areas like Cranston's Riverstone is one that comes to mind. It looks like a giant floodplain. Sunnyside downtown is definitely like ground zero for flooding. Parts of Bowness. So you have to use common sense when it comes to the flood zones. And it can create resale issues. Like after the big flood in 2023, it was more difficult to sell in certain areas that were flooded. And it's all documented. There is a lot of mapping information out there for where the waters flowed. And if you're in the flood area, you can have resale issues, plus insurance problems. So it can affect your resale value. Insurance can be difficult. And the actual act of having your home flooded would be a giant pain, huge hassle, a nightmare, very costly. It just wouldn't be much fun. So exercise common sense when you're buying in a flood area. Next up, let's talk about condos. So that's easy. I would never buy on the ground floor or below grade for any condo. Now, below grade is like in the basement of a condo. That's just tough to sell, so good luck selling that in the future. For the most part, I wouldn't buy any ground floor units unless they're in very nice neighborhoods, like on the west side. I've heard stories of people in the Beltline on the ground floor and with homeless people banging on their windows asking for cans and bottles and money. So that would really annoy me. And you do remove a good chunk of the buying pool by buying a ground floor unit because many people are just scared of them. So you have less buyers for that type of property. So no ground floor, no below grade. I probably wouldn't buy any condos that are above the parkade just because you get headlights and extra noise and it does affect your resale value. Now, I would buy a condo if your goal is to live in it for a few years. It is better than renting, but I would not be buying a condo as an investment property. I think it's hard to make the numbers work out, and the condo fees in Calgary have just skyrocketed. It's difficult, and so as an investment property, I would stay away from condos, but I would buy them if you plan to live in it. But I wouldn't anticipate the values going up like a crazy amount. I mean, we did see that during COVID, but since the last year or so, we've seen the reality set back in and the condo market has started to struggle. So as an investor, I'd probably stay away from townhouses, duplexes, and condos. I would just stick with single-family homes in Calgary as an investor. And continuing with condos, I would stay away from condos that have poor reserve funds. So if you are buying one, make sure to do the condo document research and check the reserve fund. And be cautious with brand new builds. They intentionally have low condo fees to sell them off, and then down the road they have issues with their reserve fund. So you need to make sure you do your research and make sure that there's an adequate reserve fund. Otherwise, you'll have massive special assessments in the future. And on the note of special assessments, sometimes it's not too bad. Like they're fixing maybe air conditioning or stuff like that. But other times they have massive issues with like the parkade, with the post-tension cables, roofing, and it's going to be like a multi-year project. I would just stay away from that altogether if it were me. And I'd probably stay away from anything that has a huge condo fee. Now you'll see the condos that are like $250,000, one bedroom, one bath, good for, first-time home buyers, but they have huge condo fees of $700 per month. I would just stay away from that. I think you're almost better off renting than buying a condo like that with huge condo fees. And the last point on condos is post-tension cables. This can be an issue for some buyers because the lenders, not all lenders, but some lenders and some of the insurers have issues with post-tension cables. So if you're trying to get financed and maybe your credit score is not the best, you're just trying to get into the market, I would probably avoid a post-tension cable building because they are harder to get financed. And the next point, let's talk about living in a brand new area. So buying a brand new home is totally fine, but I would be cautious of buying a brand new home if your intention is to sell it after a couple of years. I find that's difficult because these brand new areas of Calgary, which there are many, they build in different stages. So depending on how long you've lived there, you might be trying to sell your home against brand new homes in the same area. And that can be kind of difficult. It's kind of like selling a brand new truck next to a demo truck that has 20,000 kilometers and you want the same price. It's going to be difficult. That's the same kind of situation as selling in a brand new area. So if you are buying a brand new home in a brand new neighborhood like Glacier Ridge, I would plan to stay there for a long time because if you try to sell it after a couple of years, it might be difficult. Now, right now, this might sound a bit far-fetched as our property values have really shot up the last couple of years. But I can recall from like 2015 to 2020, in the deep south, there are lots of new builds, and it was tough to sell your resale properties in these areas as the prices were kind of falling and stagnating. And builders were trying to give away their properties at the same time. So it can be a bit of a challenge if you do sell in a brand new area and the market does turn. The market won't always go up, so just be cautious. And if you are living in a brand new area, I'd be going into it with the mindset of staying there for a long time. And the next point, let's talk about buying a really old home from say 1910. There are parts of Calgary that are quite old where you'll find some properties like this. And now I love the mature areas of Calgary compared to the bland suburbs, but buying a really old home is not for everybody. I routinely show them, people write offers, and it seems like they always fall apart. I think a lot of people love the idea of fixing up an old property until it comes down to like the home inspection issues and the cost to actually do it. And then they back out of it. So for most buyers, this is probably a no-go unless you're extremely familiar with the costs involved and all the work and you're very handy. But I would say most buyers are not like that. And from my experience, most buyers back out from these properties after the home inspection. So you'll have issues with electrical, plumbing, there could be asbestos. You've got issues like very steep staircases that are almost dangerous. You've got really bad basement layouts or no basement at all, which I probably wouldn't buy a home without a basement. You've got insurance issues. There could be issues with the sewer line. You might have to auger it. There's all sorts of issues. Maybe the home is actually tilted, which is quite common in these old properties. So there's a whole list of items that can pop up when you're buying a brand new home. So it's just not for everybody. But I find people love the idea of it until it comes down to like the actual cost and plan. Then it's a no-go for most buyers. Now, these properties can be great for the right person. My stepdad is a classic example, but he's a master electrician who's been doing this for like 30 plus years. He can do it himself, but he also has industry contacts. He knows the costs and the procedures inside and out. But for most buyers, they won't have that skill set. So I'd say for most people, these very old properties are probably a no-go. And the next point, buying the most expensive home on the block or in the neighborhood. So say you're driving around Rundle or Marlborough and all the properties are around $500,000 or like 1,000 square foot bungalows. And then you see a property that's like $900,000 and it just doesn't fit the mold of that area. That property will probably never get its full value and it'll be tough to sell in the future as well. You kind of want to be like the average of the neighborhood. You don't want to be $900,000 in like a very modest neighborhood. It doesn't fit the mold. So basically, you just kind of want to fit the mold for that neighborhood. You don't want to be like an oversized luxury home in Rundle when everything else is just like your typical modest $500,000 property. You just won't get that value back. It'll be tough to sell in the future as well. And the next point are court sales. So court sales can happen for a variety of reasons. They could be foreclosures, they could be for divorce, they could be for a variety of reasons. But they are a no-go for most buyers because the offers have to be unconditional for the most part. So unconditional means no financing, no home inspection, maybe no condo document review. So for most buyers, that's just too much risk to take on. And they can be very annoying. You can submit an offer to the court and not hear anything for like an entire month. So it's very frustrating. Now, people tend to like the idea of the court sale because they think they're getting a real deal. But for the most part, I find that court sales, they typically sell for like market value. You're not getting a smoking deal, and I don't think it's worth the headache of writing unconditionally and not hearing back from the court for, say, a month. So for most buyers, it's just too much headache, too much risk, and it's not worth the effort. And the next point, I wouldn't be buying a grow op. So a marijuana grow operation where they've had like the plants inside the home. You come across issues with mold and moisture as they keep the home really hot to grow the plants. And that can have obviously mold. You don't know what's behind the walls. So there's just too much risk for that. Now, even if it's been remediated, I probably still wouldn't buy it just because you can Google the address and there should be like an Alberta Health Services disclaimer with that property, which will follow that property forever. So for your typical buyer, I think that's too much risk to take on. There's too much stigma with that. And if you're an investor, you don't really care about that, and maybe you're getting a good deal and your plan is to rent it forever, maybe that's like a good situation for you. But for your typical buyer, I probably would avoid these properties altogether. There's just too much unknowns and too much stigma with them. And the last section here, I have a bunch of random points. And the first point is I wouldn't be buying a property that is so custom, that is so unique, that it becomes hard to sell in the future. Like over-the-top custom features might be a no-go for a lot of buyers. Like an indoor pool, for example. And pools, for the most part in Calgary, are a deal breaker. Most parts of the world, a pool is a good thing. But in Calgary, pools are tough to sell. I've had 2 pool listings in the past, both indoor pools, both in Varsity Estates. I sold one, and one we couldn't give away. And the one that I sold, we probably had over 100 viewings on it. It was nonstop. They were extremely difficult to sell. So custom features like that can be a deal breaker for a lot of buyers. Next point, let's talk about mobile homes. Now, there are a few mobile home parks in Calgary, but they can be tough to sell. And I don't like the idea that you own the home, but you don't own the land. And that doesn't sit well with me. And they can be hard to sell. I did one of these in the past. I think it was in Greenview by Bowness. And it was tough to sell because the bank wanted some random CSA number, but the property was renovated and we couldn't find the number. So I'm not sure what the buyer did to find this number, but it got done, but it was very difficult. And I just don't like the idea that you own the property, but you don't own the land. So I'd probably stay away from these for the most part in Calgary. And I would probably avoid some weird layouts in properties, like your back split, your 3-level split is always kind of not the best. Some 4-level splits are awesome and some are not that great. And an issue I find with split level homes is that the measurements are always a bit off because the 3rd level is above grade sometimes it's below grade, and sometimes you can't really tell, and the measurements show up smaller than what it is on the MLS system. So they are at a disadvantage. I would say Calgary is better for bungalows and two-story properties versus the split-level homes. I'd probably avoid anything that's very abnormal compared to the rest of the homes in the neighborhood. And for example, I had a home listed for sale in Shaughnessy. I think it was back in 2018. And the lot size was like 3 times the size of everybody else's in the neighborhood. It was a huge lot. It almost looked like an acreage style lot right in the city. And we probably had over 100 showings on this listing. You'd think a big lot would be a good thing, but it was extremely difficult to sell. Now, mind you, the market wasn't as good in 2018 as it is right now, but it was tough to sell. So I'd probably avoid anything that's very abnormal for the area. And again, you just kind of want to fit the mold for that neighborhood. You don't want to be an extreme outlier in terms of lot size or price point. Just kind of fit the mold for that neighborhood. And the next point, for sloped properties that have retaining walls, this can be a deal breaker for a lot of buyers. I've had tons of deals fall apart due to retaining walls. And it drives me nuts because sometimes you'll have a report that says the retaining wall is sound, but they look kind of scary sometimes, like they're cracking, there's weeds coming out of them. And from my experience, a lot of buyers have backed out of good properties because of retaining walls. So for these slope properties, which can be good for the most part, usually they have like walkout basements and nice views, but they do come with some issues like retaining walls. Next point, I wouldn't be buying anything that has like a weird feature. Like I once showed a property in Bears Paw and you enter the home through the basement, which is kind of weird. So I wouldn't be buying anything like that. I once showed a property somewhere on the west side and the kitchen was on the second level, not the main level. It affects your resale value when you have weird features like that don't fit the mold. And the next point, bedrooms and bathrooms. I think if you're buying a property that just has one bathroom, like a house with like 3 bedrooms, only 1 bathroom, that can be a tough sell. I find that if you have a home that has 2 bedrooms versus 3 on the main level, the 2 bedrooms are always a bit of a tough sell. It seems most buyers want to have at least 3 bedrooms on the main floor, unless it's one of those properties that's meant for like a retirement where there's only 1 bedroom up and maybe 1 or 2 down. But for like your typical family, 3 bedrooms is always more desirable than having 2 bedrooms. And if you're getting elderly and you have knee issues, I probably wouldn't be buying a 2-story property. You think this would be common sense, but people still do this and they still sell homes after a couple of years because they realize the stairs aren't for them. So if you are getting up there in age, I'd probably go with a bungalow versus the 2-story. And the next point, poorly flipped homes. So if you're buying a renovation project, make sure to really analyze it well, get a good home inspector, because sometimes builders or renovators, they'll cut corners and they'll hide issues. So make sure to look at it very closely. Even if at first glance it looks like it's a very nice renovated property, there could be issues under the surface. Well, there you have it. That's my take on the properties that you should never buy in Calgary. And if you're out there watching this and you're thinking about making a move and you could use some help, I'd love to be a resource. You can call, text, or email me. And if you go to the pinned comment, I've also got a buyer's guide, seller's guide, and a relocation guide, all free for download. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you on the next video.